What's going on, YouTube? It's Adam here with Retro Repairs, and today I've got another package that I'm looking forward to opening up and troubleshooting, see if we can fix this. This just actually arrived this morning today, and I've been expecting it for a little while. It got hung up in shipping, actually got shipped out to Quebec, and they had to redirect it. So finally it's arrived, and let's just dive right into it, show you what we've got. So I picked this up on eBay for about $25 US, and if I can make it work, I can resell it for probably about $80 or $90 easy. And so what it is the Sega 32X. So I'll let you get a pretty good view of that. It's a little scuffed at the front. It looks like it used to have a sticker here, so it could use a bit of a cleaning, but overall it's in okay physical condition. The 32X was one of Sega's first add-ons for the Sega Genesis, second add-on, sorry, for the Sega Genesis, alongside the Sega CD. And what it would do is allow you to play special 32-bit Sega games on the Sega Genesis, which was only made for 16 bits. So it's a pretty cool little item. It sold spectacularly poorly, mainly because the Sega Saturn was coming out, and which was a 32-bit system as well, and they just didn't, their customers weren't really interested in supporting two different systems and buying peripherals for two different systems. So that really kind of failed. There weren't a whole lot of games for it. One nice thing about this, it looks like this guy packed up the box pretty well. It's always nice when people actually take care and actually want to make sure that your product arrives perfectly. So we're going to get the Sega out, get it fired up, and test out a couple of games. Okay, so right here I have my own personal Sega Genesis with 32X and CD. So just to prove to you that these games work, I want to prove to myself as well that these games are going to work first try. Just trying a Sega Genesis game, Sonic the Hedgehog. Press start, it's powering up, we got the license screen, and we booted into the game. Cool. 32X game. This one we have here is Virtua Fighter, and we'll plug it in and make sure that this will be red the first time. Doesn't. Possibly the game's just dirty. Just want to try a different one. Star Wars. There we go. So I think Virtua Fighter was just a bit dirty. Okay, so that's Star Wars on the 32X. If you've never really seen one of these, they kind of use, looks like kind of blocky, almost StarCraft, or not StarCraft, Star Fox-like graphics on this for pseudo 3D. But anyways, oops, it works, so that's what the point of that test was. So now I'm going to disconnect it and hook up this new 32X just to see if I get the same result. So the kind of annoying part of the 32X is how much actually has to plug into it. It's got a video in, a video out, and a power in. So you have to have its own power supply. There we go. So there's a patch cable that connects it to the Sega Genesis, as apparently they hadn't figured out how to make the video go through the cartridge slot yet. There's a video out cable which goes out to my TV, and then a power cable. So now that we got it hooked up, let's try Sonic the Hedgehog. I got nothing. What's going on with that? Just want to make sure these plugs are hooked in properly. Alright, so black screen. I'm just going to try, just jiggle the cartridge a bit. And there we have the license screen. So it's possible this cartridge slot was just kind of dirty. So Sega, Sonic the Hedgehog, that means a Sega Genesis game works. I like to test these with original Sega Genesis games first, as since they are backwards compatible, it will play a Genesis game, and when a Genesis cartridge is inserted, it basically acts as a pass-through, so it doesn't activate any of the circuitry inside the 32X. All it does is send the signal from each of these pins straight into the Genesis. When you use a 32X game, that's where it will actually start to use the processor and everything inside the 32X. So if there's a problem with the 32X, it might sometimes play Genesis games, but not 32X games. So let's try Star Wars. And I'm just going to kind of insert and remove it a couple of times and press start. So we have the license screen. And then just black. So I just want to try that a couple times just to rule out the cartridge slot, try and clean that a bit. And we have, looks like we have a game. So I think this 32X works just fine. It's just dirty. So this video is pretty much going to be me opening it up, cleaning it out, and making sure that it works perfectly every time. So we're going to jump right to that and disassemble this thing. Okay, so disassembly on this Sega 32X is really not overly difficult. Sega was nice enough to not use any type of really security screws on a lot of these older systems like the Genesis, so all you need is a basic crosshead or Phillips screwdriver, depending on what you like to call it. And there's 4 screws to disassemble, so just get removing those screws, 1 on each corner of the console. Okay, and then the lid will lift just right off like that, and we can see the internals of the system. So this is the top of the inside of the top part, and as you can see, there's really not a lot to it. Since we are going to give this a wash, I'm going to disassemble this cartridge slot flap. So again, just 2 screws. Now these screws are they're brass screws, not the black screws. So just kind of keep tab on what screws came where, so that you know that you're putting them back in the right spot. So 3 screws, and we can remove this little piece of plastic from the inside. Cool, so that we can set aside. We'll pop these screws out. And again, we'll set these aside. And then we have a couple of springs. So this is what makes the cartridge slot, or the cartridge cover, close automatically. So we just need to get these springs out. Just be careful not to lose them, and they can be set aside. And then the doors will kind of pop. You gotta put them flat like this, and then it's kind of tricky. You gotta be careful with these. You don't want to break any of the tabs. How do we get it up? So this side you can actually lift it up and over, it looks like. There we go. And that popped right out. Same thing on the other side. Just kind of be careful. You can see right, let's refocus. So this side right here, we need to lift it, the post up and over, and then it will come right out. So again, we'll put all this off to the side. These are going to get cleaned, and again resume disassembly of the rest of this. So next step we want to do, all of the screws that you see here need to come out, so we're going to remove those right now. Okay, screws are out, so this shielding should just lift straight up and can be put to the side. And again, we uncover a bunch of other screws here. So a couple around the cartridge connector, a couple right here. So every other screw that you see now also is going to have to be removed. Okay, so all the screws have been removed, and now the casing's starting to kind of just slide right off like this. So you should be able to grab the board and gently lift it off the bottom of this. So here we have a little spacer, which we have to remember to reinstall. That makes it so that when you push a game into it, it's not flexing the board. More RF shielding, which can be removed, and then the bottom half of the plastic. So this, again, we're going to wash and just kind of touch up, make it look a bit better. Now here we have the actual circuitry of the system itself. So it's still attached to the bottom connector, which goes inside the Genesis, which we're going to have to remove. So what I think we can just do is, I gotta find out how to pop that out. On the back here, there's a couple very small precision size Phillips bits. Unscrew these. And then this plastic will come right off. So it does have its own shielding around the board here. And there we have the 32X. So this is essentially, this is exactly what it looks like. As you can see, there's two boards on this. Most of the processing is done on the actual vertical part, which you insert into the Sega. The top of this, I guess it refines the signal, and I don't know exactly what all these chips do. You might notice there's a lot of wires running throughout here, and when I first opened up my first Sega 32X, I thought that this was a mod of some type, because you see there's a resistor running to this orange wire, which runs down into here and ties into this contact. Turns out, no, this is actually how some 32Xs come out of the factory, which is kind of really odd since it doesn't look very professional, doesn't look very neat of a job, but it's the way it is, I guess. So just kind of something interesting that I never really thought would have been the case. So a couple of common things that will go wrong with these. Obviously, being a cartridge, you need to make sure that the contacts are clean, so we're going to give those a thorough clean, but also the cartridge slot needs to be cleaned. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to go about doing that right now. So the best way at first is you get yourself some sort of credit card. I have a copy card for Staples, your isopropyl alcohol, and just a little microfiber cloth like we would use to clean sunglasses or eyeglasses or something. So you get the cloth nice and wet with alcohol like that. Let it soak in nicely. And then you fold it over the card like so. And you just keep on inserting and uninserting, insert and remove until you try and get up as much of the grime that's built up on those contacts as possible. It doesn't look like it's coming out very dirty, but as we saw, just jiggling those games in this slot seem to get them to work. So I think there is some oxidation and stuff that's kind of just built up in these. So keep at that for a while until you're satisfied that they're clean. So now, on the other side, what I want to do is clean this cartridge connector down here. And again, it's a pretty simple process. All I'm going to use for this, a couple Q-tips and my rubbing alcohol. So douse the Q-tip in alcohol, and then kind of one by one vertically scrub up and down each pin until you start removing stuff. So you can see a little bit of darkness on that Q-tip. That means that it is lifting some oxidation, some dirt, some grime, just stuff that will prevent a really solid contact or connection to the Sega Genesis system. Once you're done, basically do this until you no longer get any color up off with the Q-tip. So once you're done with the alcohol, wipe it with the dry side, and then check the dry side and see, is it dark? And this one is not, actually pretty good. So we're going to do the same thing to the other side. This side looks to be a little dirtier. Yeah, you can see that coming up now. So I'm going to keep on that for the rest of it. So the last common troubleshooting thing to check is these ribbon connectors right here. A lot of times if you're not getting any signal from the 32X, it has to do with these connectors. Since I actually got a signal, I'm not going to remove them, as they're clearly working properly. But sometimes what you can do is pull them out of the connection here, just clean them with alcohol and reinsert them. I just don't want to damage these connectors, which are they are a little bit delicate, so they need to be in straight and they need to not be bent or anything. So now the last step to do is going to be to bring the plastic parts upstairs, get them in the sink with some soap and water, and clean up the rest of the system. Alright, so as I've done with pretty much all the systems I open up, we've got the 32X here just soaking, and the idea is I want to get it to penetrate into this sticker residue, lift some of it up. As you can see, I'm lifting it right now, and then we're going to wipe it down with a cloth. So let it sit for maybe about 10 or 15 minutes, and then you should be able to give it a good wipe down just like that. Wipe down the whole system, and then what I like to do is, using my toothbrush, obviously not the toothbrush I use, but kind of get into these, all the little creases and crevices that you're going to have a hard time getting a finger into. So I'm going to wipe that down, dry it off, and I'll show you what we've got. Alright, so the shell of the 32X is now cleaned and dried, and it looks better, but it is a little scuffed up. So with these systems that have kind of the more high polished plastics on them, like the Sega Genesis or the 32X obviously, I like to try and do what I can to buff it up the best I can. Things like the Super Nintendo or NES really don't matter because they have a texture to that plastic. It's never really going to properly shine. So what I like to do is use a product called Plastex. This stuff is made for basically removing fine scratches from cars, so whether it be headlights, plastic parts, that type of thing. So it works kind of the same way on a game console. So it's pretty simple what you do. Grab a little bit of the Plastex, wipe it onto a cloth, and then you just rub it over an area where you have some scratching. So I'm thinking more along this this more glossy part at the top. So simply just rubbing it in here and then vigorously in circles going around until the idea being that you're going to remove some of the built up, or not the built up, but the really fine scratches on the system. This stuff is not supposed to take like labels like this 32X off. However, I am going to still be careful because I just don't want to risk it. I want this logo to remain on place. So I'm going to keep doing this for a little while, and I'll show you kind of what the end result will look. Okay, so that's what I've done. There's still a residue of it, so once you've put the Plastex on, you want to take a dry cloth and start to kind of buff it out. So again, going across the entire thing, just try to remove as much of it as you can, and then once I do, I'm going to have to rinse it. This stuff will get into the little crevices and cracks here, so we want to try and get as much of it out so it doesn't leave a noticeable stain. Alright, so this is what we've got after the Plastex treatment. So there are still a few very little scuffs and stuff on there, so if I wanted to, I could keep going with this and do it a few times, which I may do again, but the second step of this is actually going to kind of shine it. So using a little bit of Armor All car wax, we're using the same technique, just wipe it into place, dry it off, but it will help restore a lot of the shine that that plastic would have originally had. So again, just a small amount on a, whoops, that was a lot. So I'm going to wipe some of that off with a paper towel. And then same deal, you just rub it into place on the plastic here. Again, you're giving it a pretty good rub in because polish basically, again, it will fill in a lot of the very micro scratches just to kind of help restore the shine, reduce the appearance of scratches on this. So I'm trying to get it all over all the plastic, so the textured plastic on the bottom as well as the more glossy plastic at the top. So then we let it sit for a couple seconds, kind of like that. And then, using the dry side, we just try and give it a good wipe, buff out as much of the gel that's on here, the car wax. It should give it a nice clean shine to it. So that is what we've got here. So as you can see, that really looks pretty good. I don't know if you can compare it to the bottom on here on camera. I think it picks up. You can kind of see the difference between the plastics and the wax treatment on the top half versus what the bottom looks like. There's still a few scuffs, and it's just not nearly as good looking. It looks actually more defined in person. So I'm going to do the plastics to the bottom half as well off camera, and once these are both ready to go, we'll begin reassembling. Okay, so we're ready to begin reassembling now, and we're going to begin with the bottom parts of the cartridge connector. So I applied a little bit of the polish to these as well. I didn't do the whole plastics treatment, as I feel it's kind of not necessary, as these are going to be inserted into the system and just get scratched up again. So important to make sure that you are reinstalling the RF shielding around this. The RF shielding helps to reduce interference, so it will make sure the video signal remains strong coming through the cartridge connector, as that's where all the processing is done. So there are two different parts here, and the one with the bigger overhanging flap on the top belongs with the curved part of the plastic here. So simply sits into place like so. Then the other piece obviously goes on the other part of the plastic like that. Then we will grab the actual board here. So when reassembling this, the rounded part is going to go, if you hold it this way, you might note that the cartridge connector and the rest of the board do not line up straight. That's by design. So the rounded part is going to be, this is the front, and rounded part will be on the front like this. So we just have to kind of line it up so that these indents in the board fall around these posts. It may be easier to do it from this orientation so you can see what they're doing. So it should go in just like that. And then we will put the other side, the back side, on as well. Just like so. Make sure that it's pinched together flushly, and then you can reinstall those small precision screws. So one on each side of the back of this cartridge will go into place. Alright, so now we're ready to begin adding the bottom part of this shell into place. So I've done the plastics and the auto wax treatment to this, and it looks a lot shinier. I think it even picks up on camera pretty well. So we're just going to put that flat on the ground right now, and then you need to install the RF shielding for the bottom part. So it will sit into place just like that. On top of the RF shielding, you have this plastic spacer, which is going to sit just like so. And the point of this is so that when you push a cartridge into the slot here, it's not flexing the board and damaging contacts. Then you take the board and it's going to slip right through like that. So you may need to wiggle it and adjust it so that everything lines up just right. But once it's in, it should be sitting nice and flush. So I think something got moved out of place here. There we go. So it's now sitting into place. There are little posts that come up through the board here, as you can see, and make sure that all of those are clearly through the board. Give it a couple pushes in different areas, different corners on the cartridge slot. You want to make sure that it's firmly into place, and then you can begin reinstalling some screws. So the first two screws, the only screws here that are different are the long brass screws, and they belong on the cartridge slot. So number 1, number 2, and you can put those in. I like to put these in first on everything that I do, whether it's a Super Nintendo, a Sega, just so firstly, I can get them out of the way, and they usually do a good job of holding the entire board in one place in a central location. There we go. So now, this is kind of all in one place, and we can begin, even if I held it like this, it's there, it's sturdy. So then we can begin reassembly of some of the other screws. So there were a couple more to put into place before the top shielding goes in, and that is this one here, and this one right here. So basically these two big holes in the board, those screws go into place, and that just helps tie in the casing to the bottom part of the cartridge connector. So now we should be able to put nope, there's two more actually. So that's why I like to kind of line this up over top, just to get an idea of what I'm going to cover up, because it reminded me that this one here and this screw here need to be put in. So we're going to do that right now. All right, so now we can begin putting the top part of the shielding in. There's a screw hanging out there. There we go. And now just simply fill in the rest of the screws, and this is ready to have the top shell put in. Okay, so I have all of the screws in place now. So this whole unit is pretty much good to go. What I want to do is hook it up right now before I put the top on, and just make sure that everything's working as intended. So we're going to go over to the Sega right now and get that done. Alright, so hooking this guy up, again, same thing, the patch cable from the Sega Genesis goes right in the middle connector on the back. The video out will go to the connector that's on the far side, and then you need a power cable, which has fallen. There it is. Then power cable goes just in the side there. So we're going to insert it into the system. We're going to start with, again, just a Sega Genesis game, and power. Boots up perfectly the first time. But no audio. That could be a problem. There we go. Just wasn't in properly. Cool, so that works. Now we're going to test it with the 32X game, Star Wars, just to make sure that that connects. And power. And first try right into Star Wars. So I'm going to say this thing works perfectly well. It just needed a cleaning, so I've shown you how to open it up, how to disassemble the casing, and actually get this working right. And we have audio there, so that was just kind of a one-time blip. Cool, so we're going to put the top shell on, close it up, and this is going to be good to go. Okay, so before we actually put the top of the shell on, what we need to do is reinstall the cartridge slot connector. So what you need is the top of the shell, just to get your orientation right. You need this little attachment, and then the two doors, of course. Now, the reason you have the shell is so that you can double check which part goes where. So the part of the door with the square end is going to go on the top. The part with the curved end is going to go on the bottom of the screen. So we're going to put this off to the side, and that means it needs to be attached in that orientation. So what we will do is, starting with the back and the square part, there's a little hole in the bottom here, insert the first post into there, and then you have to very carefully loop it around this, some sort of piece of plastic that restricts how far the door will open, and get the other post into place. So it'll sit just like that. And then same thing for the other side. Post into the hole. Around the plastic and up. Now we need to install the springs. So the springs should be installed. You might notice when you look at it that the spring loops over the top. So I like to make sure that it will go in on the same orientation. So it will sit in kind of just like so. So all we need to do, you just push it in. Get the other end in here. You just got to kind of fight with it a little bit, and there we are. So there's the first spring into place, and then same thing with the second one. So again, making sure that it's going in the same direction. Put the bottom in first. Get the top side underneath the door, and then loop it around the post. So there we have the springs are in place. Now we grab the top half of the shell, line it up, and you just have 3 screws to go in now. Right, and those screws are now in place, so we're ready to assemble the top half of the shell to the bottom half. So again, it's really simple. We just put them together like so, and you have 4 screws to go into the bottom. So 1 in each corner, and then we're done. So now screws are in, and the Sega 32X, that's a pretty good looking system here. It's cleaned up, it looks good, it works well, and it's ready to go. So I'm going to use this guy. I already have one myself. I'm just going to use this kind of as an add-on for an existing Genesis that I have that I'm trying to sell, and hopefully I can make it a bit more enticing, get a little bit more for it. So that's really about it. We're going to, again, I like to turn it on just to make sure everything works after I've fully assembled it, but I think we're done here. So that's it for this. As you can see, the 32X works well. We're now playing some Star Wars on it, so I would say this has been another successful repair video. So I'd like to thank you very much for watching. I really hope that you enjoyed what you saw. I hope maybe this might help someone out there get a 32X that they previously thought was defective and help them to repair it. So once again, thanks a lot for watching. Be sure to subscribe to my channel. You'll be the first to know when I upload new videos. Give the video a like and leave a comment below. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you want to see something as well in the future that I haven't done already, and maybe I'll see what I can do with that. So once again, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you next time.